What makes an excellent leader? And are they really that scarce? And what do they do to merit such exceptional compensation? Welcome to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. Your host is one of the world's leading experts on international leadership. She's a master certified coach and facilitates a mastermind for CEOs of international companies. She's the author of 3 books, Abrasive Leaders, Global Nomadic Leaders, and Managing Brilliant Jerks. She has worked with Nestle, Novartis, and even the United Nations. She's especially good at helping executives fast track to the C-suite. Welcome, Dr. Katrina Burris.
Welcome to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Katrina Burris, and today we have Michael F. Schein. Michael, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait to have this conversation.
So I just want to tell my listeners that I'm traveling and I don't have my fabulous gear to record. So if the sound is not optimal, please forgive me. But I thought it was just too important to interview Michael as soon as possible. So Michael, you are the most welcome. And my first question to you is, you say hype is a word that's often has a negative connotation, and yet you choose it as the title of your book. So why?
Partially for effect. I think over time, words that have some power in the beginning lose their potency. So the word marketing one time really meant tapping into human psychology to get people to buy what you were selling. Now, when people talk about marketing, they're just as often talking about what buttons you can push on your social media platform. And it's funny, I'll see professional marketers, they talk about engagement and analytics and whether they should use Instagram or Clubhouse or Twitter. And they often forget what they're really trying to do, which is get people excited about whatever they or their clients are selling. So hype has often been a word that people thought of as negative, like, driving a lot of attention around something that didn't really have inherent value. But where I was inspired was actually in the world of hip hop, where rap groups, always have what they call a hype man, somebody who is in charge of getting the crowd and getting the community excited about the group. And they're an integral part of the group. And it's a very important role in hip hop. And I just thought that was an excellent model for what we all need to be doing, which is to focus less on the technology and focus more on getting lots and lots of people excited about whatever idea or product or service you're putting out into the world so that they'll take an action and give you a shot.
So give us the name of your book first.
So my book, the title is very pithy. It's called the Hype Handbook, and the subtitle is very long. It is 12 indispensable success secrets from the world's greatest propagandists, self-promoters, cult leaders, mischief makers, and boundary breakers.
Wow, what a title. That is great. So what would you say are the key messages you give in your book?
So the overall concept of the book, and this comes partially from personal experience and my career and partially just from my area of study, is that there are certain principles of mass psychology that human beings cannot, help but react to. In other words, human brains are not designed to see the world accurately. They're designed to help us survive and hopefully, as far as nature is concerned, reproduce. And that often means that we take a lot of mental shortcuts. Also, we're extremely social creatures. We're the most social, at least mammal on Earth. And so what that means is that we behave differently in groups than we do as individuals. They can be online groups, they can be offline groups. And we also react differently to some stimuli as we do to other stimuli, even when the content is the same. So what I got curious about was, does it matter what the moral content of the stuff that we're promoting is, that we're hyping is? So a lot of times you see these really crazy characters like propaganda artists for dictatorships and cult leaders, and they do some things that are so horrible, that we consider so horrible, but they get huge numbers of people to follow along with them. And I got very interested in, is what they do inherently evil in terms of getting people excited? Or is it just that they've cracked some code to get people to do what they want them to do, and it can be used for good and it can be used for evil? And I found out that it's very much the former. I mean, these mass psychology principles that I call hype are really amoral. It's just any set of activities that get people to get very emotional about something so that you can move them in a certain direction. And so really my goal with the book was to put these tools in the hands of the good guys, because the bad guys already get it. They tend to get it naturally. And it's the people out there who are promoting good causes, who are promoting good products, good services, who really need these skill sets more than most. So I really studied hundreds of these kind of people to try to extract general principles that you can apply pretty directly.
Great. So, Michael, now you also publicly called out prominent gurus like Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins, and Simon Sinek. What's your point of view about that and about them?
Yeah, I mean, when you say I called them out, I think what you're referring to is that I write columns for various publications like Forbes and Fortune and Psychology Today and Inc. And I've written some articles where I sort of took issue or sort of exposed in my mind some of the strategies and tactics that they use to get such diehard followers. And in certain cases, Gary Vaynerchuk and Tony Robbins' team in particular pushed back, in one case publicly and in one case through a strongly worded email. But, there are all these kind of gurus, as you call them, and many people call them out there, who sell ideas for a living. So like a Tony Robbins, he doesn't really sell a product. I mean, he sells information products, but he's essentially selling his thought process, or kind of this idea that if you follow his sort of methodology for living a better life, all your problems will kind of go away. Gary Vaynerchuk, he used to sell wine, but really now he sort of sells himself as an online guru. So companies will hire him to get a little bit of that Gary Vaynerchuk magic, whatever that is. And Simon Sinek, similarly, he's sort of a professional speaker. And a lot of times these people give a lot of very strongly worded advice to their hordes of followers on what they should do. So like Gary Vaynerchuk, he's tempered this recently, but when I wrote the article, his whole thing is like work like a dog. That's the single most important factor for success. So he'll talk about how even when he's on the toilet, he's working, and that's what you need to do. And he doesn't even use the word on the toilet. He has kind of a brash personality. He uses a different word. But my whole thing is that if I give people the advice, don't follow these people's advice, follow what they do. Because a Gary Vaynerchuk, if you worked 18 hours a day, but everything else about your business was broken, that doesn't do very much for you. In fact, some research would say that 18 hours a day of work will actually make you perform less well because you'll be tired and you'll make poor decisions.
Yes.
However, a lot of cults get their followers to work on their behalf as well. The Moonies, the church, the Unification Church, is notorious for getting its followers to work 18-hour days. And because what that does is it bonds the follower to the guru, in that psychologically on a subconscious level, you think to yourself, the minute you start doubting their ideas, you say, but I've been working 18 hours a day. I couldn't have been working for nothing. It's like a sunk cost fallacy. So what I try to tell people is, if you really want to learn how to promote yourself, dissect what they do to get such big followings. Don't actually listen to their advice. The problem is these people are selling advice, so they don't like when I denigrate their advice.
So what was the reaction? You said a tough email, but any other reactions they had to your?
Well, Gary Vaynerchuk, I mean, I tell this story a lot because in some ways it helped launch my career. And I don't think that was Gary Vaynerchuk's, that's not what he wanted to do. But I was very early on in my new career, in the thing I do now. I mean, I run a company where we help people implement these hype campaigns. We help them build campaigns that drive attention to whatever they're selling. And at the time, I was just starting out. So I wrote this article and he actually recorded. So I was a nobody, I was really, really early. And he recorded a video calling me out by name. And in the beginning, he was polite, but by the end, he was obviously very, very agitated. And all of his followers, who are usually young, started lambasting me and bashing me on Twitter. And I got scared because he's such a big deal. And I thought that I had made a mistake, but it turned out that that was the beginning of my visibility, because all of the people who sort of thought the way I did, who didn't have someone to put it into words, started to coalesce around me. So that was that. In the case of Tony Robbins, who's probably even bigger, I wrote an article about him, and his team wrote Forbes, and Forbes contacted me and they said, Tony Robbins' team, because they're notoriously litigious, like they are known for suing people and things like that. So they got scared. And, Forbes basically said, make sure everything in your article is right. Because I said that Tony Robbins pushed a woman who had stood up for the Me Too movement. So I sent them the video, and the editor said to me, well, yeah, it looks like he was pushing the woman, because they said that he didn't push the woman. So, yeah, I mean, I think, these people are selling an image. They're not selling sheet metal. They're not selling ball bearings. They're selling themselves. So when someone comes out and punctures that image, it can be potentially very threatening to them.
Very interesting. And what about Simon Sinek?
He never responded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say he sells?
I think he's a professional speaker. He writes books. His most famous book is called Start With Why. And so organizations bring him in and he pay them a lot of money to just sort of talk about his ideas.
Yes, which are in a sense very simple, but the way he communicates it is very good.
What I found interesting about Simon Sinek, and again, I'm not saying that any of these people are con artists or are bad at what they do. That's not my point. I mean, a lot of people get a lot of value out of these people. What I'm saying is that they all offer solutions that are supposed to transform your life. And for some people it does. But what I'm saying to people is, if you really want to learn how to promote yourself, worry less about that and just see how they do it. So to your point, Simon Sinek, basically his most famous book, Start With Why, he basically is saying, if you want to start a business, start with the why. Don't start with the what you're doing, start with why you're doing it, which sure, but that's a very, very basic concept. He's not the first to think of it. He put it in really good form. But what I found interesting about him, he has this persona where he comes across as like an academic, he wears wire-rimmed glasses. He has sort of a British accent. I think he lived in both places and he plays that up a little bit. He uses a lot of scientific jargon. He's always talking about neurons and different brain chemicals that are released here and there. But when you really dig in, he's never been anything but a professional marketer. He was an ad man. He worked at advertising agencies. So now the product that he's selling is Simon Sinek. He's crafted this image of this public intellectual, but he's selling very simple ideas. So it's kind of like his ideas are so simple. And so they're not really that original. They're good. They're useful. But, he has a new book, The Infinite Game. And it's quite literally a repackaging of another book that's a more complicated book that's called Finite and Infinite Games. And he pays homage to it. He cites the source. But that book, which was groundbreaking, didn't sell that much. It sold to a small circle of insiders. And Sinek's books sold like hotcakes. And the difference is he packages pretty simple ideas, as you said, that aren't that original in a way that anyone can understand, but also feel smart for understanding it. So that you look at these ideas and they're simple, but it's couched in what I call scientific language. The simpler an idea is, the more kind of scientific ear candy or eye candy you should put around it, because it makes it seem very authoritative and makes the listener feel like someone who's in the know. Whereas if your ideas truly are original and truly are threatening, then you need to simplify them and not simplify them. Then you need to make them more familiar. So it's an interesting dynamic. We're scared of things that are truly different, but when we're hearing something that isn't truly different, we want to feel like we're in the presence of intelligence and uniqueness. Humans are weird.
Interesting point. They say the same thing about Daniel Goleman, that in fact his philosophy and his book is based on a much earlier book.
Absolutely. That's 100% true. I mean, he's good at what he does, but he did not create the concept of emotional intelligence at all.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But he must be a fabulous marketer.
He's a very good marketer.
And fabulous at simplifying concepts.
Right. The best ones are. I mean, one of the reasons I got into my line of work is because my main client base is consultants and executive coaches. And what I would find about them often is the best ones. I mean, the incompetent ones, the ones who don't really provide value, they just get knocked out of the market. But I would see really excellent consultants and executive coaches. And those are the people who have done, who've worked with PhDs. Sometimes they are PhDs. Their work has really transformed the industries. And then you see other executive coaches and consultants who they're good, they have an effect, but it's nothing groundbreaking. And what I would often find is that the ones who were good were the ones who were blowing up. who were really making all the money. And the ones who were excellent, they were really just sort of hustling for work, meaning they got it through referrals and et cetera. And they would often get bitter about that because their stuff was so groundbreaking. And ideas are everything to me. Like getting an audience for groundbreaking ideas is sort of, that's why I live. That's why I get up in the morning. And I got very interested in that, there was kind of this concept among the better consultants and executive coaches who almost packaging stuff in a simple way was beneath them, or packaging stuff in a way that would get people emotionally excited was beneath them, that their work should just kind of like, it was so good that it should float to the top on its own. And it just became really important to me to burst that bubble, to sort of turn that notion upside down and then give these kinds of companies and people the tools they needed to get the audience. Because why shouldn't the very best ideas have an audience? Why are only the people who are doing what everyone else is doing, but folks spend most of their time on packaging and promotion? Why should they get the ideas? That's not good for the world we live in, right?
Right, absolutely. So your target market are coaches and consultants.
Typically executive coaches, but some other coaches as well, but high-level coaches. Yeah.
And you help them specifically in making their ideas surface and have the gravitas they merit?
Well, just that, someone is selling a set of ideas and it's a function of, okay, how can we put these ideas out into the world, package them, and hype them ethically, always according to an ethical code, so that they never lack for business. They never lack for an audience. And the only way to do that is to drive a ton of excitement around those concepts. And the only way to drive a ton of excitement is to follow tried and true mass psychology principles, which usually have more in common with hype artists than they do with, whatever, going to networking events or whatever. So it's a function of, if you were selling a children's toy, you wouldn't just stick it in a brown box and, say, well, it's a good toy, people should buy it, right? But promoting an idea is a little more complicated. You need to get people extremely worked up in a positive way to try those ideas out and incorporate them into their lives. You need to build a following. And that's why I call it hype instead of marketing. Marketing is, should we use Instagram? Should we use advertising? What's our ad budget? Hype is, how do we get large numbers of people worked up into a frenzy where they feel like if they don't have this idea, where they truly identify with these ideas and they feel like they're so life-changing that they need to have them. So that's sort of what we do.
So you help people focus on the marketing idea, not marketing, but the focus is on the ideas and the gravitas of the ideas rather than the distribution system, which is the Instagram, the YouTube, the TikTok, whatever.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Yep.
Uh-huh. So you don't like the word marketing because it can be confused with the means of distribution of the information. What would you call it?
Hype.
Hype. Okay. To get the excitement around the idea.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And so what would you say is really helpful for your clients to promote themselves rather than doing the work for them? Why do you think that, in fact, they shouldn't use a marketing expert or a hype expert? They should do it themselves.
Well, let me push back gently to that. I think bringing in experts is important. You can't do everything yourself. I guess my point is that what a lot of companies will do is they say, okay, we have this product, or we have this consulting package, or we have this coaching, retainer engagement. And it's really good. We know it is. So let's hire a marketing agency to market it. But they don't think before about, is there anything baked into the content of their idea that's inherently hooky, that's inherently, as you would say, marketable, inherently hypeable? So they bring on an agency, and the agency is just working with whatever they give them. And so they start saying, well, okay, let's create a bunch of content, and we'll build a content calendar, and we'll blog or we'll podcast 4 times a week. And then we'll do 6 Twitters, in this way, and tag these people. And then we'll look at the analytics. Those are all valuable tools, but starting in that order is like saying, I want to write a groundbreaking novel. which word processor should I use? Let me look at Microsoft Word. Let me look at WordPerfect. Maybe typewriters are better. Well, what about notebooks? And you spend 6 months, researching and trying out different notebooks and typewriters, whereas that's the last thing you should care about. It's important. You need to write on something. You need to get it out into the world. But first, you need a great concept. You need story structure. You need all of that. And a great novelist can write on anything if they have that stuff down. So what I'm saying is, there are, as I've broken it down, 12 strategies that drive people to get excited and take action. One is, for example, I call it make war, not love. It's that you have to have a strong stance against an idea, not just being for something. Another one is something I call perfect your packaging, which means you would need to eliminate all those parts of your persona that aren't your central point of view. Whatever, there are 12. Within those 12 concepts, which every quote unquote hype artist that I found have, there are infinite experiments that you can run. People have hired young people to go out in the middle of the night and tack things up on doors, and they've used the internet. There's a million things you can do. So my whole thing is, we work with clients and we always driven by these mass psychology principles. We say, okay, let's build and run very quick experiments. So it's not like we just say, oh, go do it yourself. We construct these experiments with people. We build them, we co-create them. We even help them implement, sort of. But what I want them to do is have some skin in the game. You need to take a step and go out into the world. And if that means changing your product or your offering to be more compelling to people, you need to do that, because it's all integrated, right? It's all connected. So what happens is, what a lot of companies do is they throw money at the problem. They hire a marketing agency and say, go market it. But by doing that, they're just kind of absolving themselves of any responsibility. I want people who work with us and with me to have this ability baked into their DNA. So the next time they create an offering, they're thinking, okay, we have a great offering, but what's the hook? How are we going to distribute it? It's kind of the way Jeff Bezos, whenever he has one of his team members create an idea for a new product, they have to come with a press release to the meeting. And if it's a bad press release,
great idea.
He won't release it, because the two things are integrated.
Yes. Do you speak about this in your book?
I don't speak about Amazon, but I speak about a lot of the things I'm talking about.
And where can people get the hold of your book? Where can they purchase it?
Yeah, so thank you for offering that. It's, it was published by McGraw-Hill. So I'm in all of the regular places. These days in the world of the pandemic, what most people would do is just go to Amazon and type in the Hype Handbook, but it's in plenty of bookstores as well. You can order it at your independent bookseller.
Great. So what's your next book you're going to write?
Oh gosh, I'm playing around with some ideas, but I'm not there yet. This thing didn't come out all that long ago. So I'm still promoting this one, or hyping this one, I should say.
Yes, right. Congratulations. Well, we've come to the end of our podcast. I really want to thank you for this insight, and we'll have all the contact details on our website. Thank you very much for.
Well, thanks. What a great conversation. I appreciate it.
You take care.
You too.
We would love to know what you thought of this podcast. Write us an email at drkatrina with a K at excellentexecutivecoaching.com. We would love to hear what you liked and what we could improve. This podcast has been sponsored by excellentexecutivecoaching.com.
Thank you for listening to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. You can subscribe to all future podcasts at excellentexecutivecoaching.com. Join us each Wednesday to learn more about the latest trends in leadership techniques and bring your coaching to the next level. To learn more about Dr. Burris's CEO Mastermind, use the contact form at excellentexecutivecoaching.com.